In this video, I will go over weighted average, moving average, and naive forecasting. So the first thing we do is we look at the direction of the data. So the oldest is at the bottom, the most recent is at the top, so we're going to be moving in this direction. If the data was showing the other direction, for instance, if we were to sort these this way, then we would move from the top down. So always check that. So for this one, to set the naive, 2002 will always be equal to 2001. 2003 always equal to 2002. So one of the mistakes students make is they use the current to forecast the current. We're using the past to predict the future here. So once we've set this, we can grab our autofill handle, drag up, and that's it. MAD is always the absolute value and the difference of forecast minus actual. I can drag this down. If we don't have a value here, we don't use that in our MAD. For our MSE, it's the same thing, except we square that, so we can either use caret 2 or we can do equals this times this. Either one works. Autofill that down. Then for MAPE, if you remember, that's actually the MAD divided by the actual. And then we either have to multiply this times 100 or we can format it as a percent. That will do the same thing. And then if you remember, the MAD is always the average of all of the MADs. And again, I can grab the autofill handle, drag that over, because that will give me the average and the average. Now the forecast for 2019, so this is the forecast for 2018. The forecast for 2019 would just be dragging that up, and that makes that forecast 1038. So that is naive. Now for 4-period moving average, I'm going to correct that. I'm going to grab this information here. I'm going to put it in there. All right, so for 4-period moving average, again, this is going to be our forecast column. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I use these 4 to predict this 5th one. So if we look at this pattern, 4-period moving average, we're using 2001, 2, 3, and 4 to forecast 2005. So this is simply the average of those 4. We drag up, and this is our forecast for 2019. MAD is calculated the same way. Absolute of actual minus forecast. Again, we don't use these. MSE, same way. Don't use these. MAPE, always the same way, regardless of which method you use to forecast. And then once again, we always take the average of these. All right. So then that's our moving average, our weighted moving average. So again, I'm going to copy the actual over. I will insert another column there. Okay, so for this one, I'll zoom in a little bit here. So for this one, we're using 3 periods, 5, 3, 2. And we know that we're moving from oldest to most recent. So for our first one, we're weighting this one at 0.2, 0.3, 0.5. So I'm using these three to forecast this fourth one. So this function is going to be equals 0.5 times this value plus 0.3 times this value plus 0.2 times this value. If you're worried about your order of operations, you can always throw parentheses in there. For some students this is more confusing, for some it's less confusing. Drag up, and this is our 2019 forecast. MAD would again be calculated the same way. So on and so forth. For these, the only real difference is we change the weights. So for this one, we would just use 631. For this one, we're going to use 4. So if we were to go over, grab these. So we're weighting these 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. And then we drag those up. So we won't have a forecast for this one similar to how these four, similar to how we don't have a forecast for these three. MAD, MSE, and MAPE are always calculated the same regardless of your forecast method. Those are, again, our three measures of error. Work through these problems, look at the other videos in this brief series, and let me know if you have questions.